I'm Karen Varga with CEA-Grown Greenhouse Produce, an innovative brand that engages with the rapidly expanding global greenhouse produce industry through a variety of platforms. Our mission is to educate and connect greenhouse produce growers and industry allies to help them better understand and sustainably advance the global food industry. On this episode of CE Ag Talks, I'll be speaking with Scott Walker, president of Walker Brothers, which is a family-owned agricultural business in operation since the mid-1880s. We'll be discussing some of the company's recent innovations in asparagus for CEA production. Scott, welcome to CE Ag Talks.
Thank you, Karen. Pleasure to be here.
So, Scott, I know we don't want to date ourselves here, but how long have you been involved in agriculture?
Well, I figure I started here on the farm when I was about 10, probably, which I'm 65 now, so that's 55, right?
What about asparagus farming specifically?
We planted our first asparagus field here on the farm in 1972. So I'll date myself again. I was 13 years old, and I was out there in the field being forced to plant it.
So essentially, asparagus has been your whole life for many years.
It has. It really evolved into something pretty big for us.
So, for those not familiar, how exactly is asparagus typically grown in the U.S. and in other parts of the world?
Well, so here in the U.S., it's pretty much the same for all states. The spears come up in the spring. We harvest for between 6 and 8 weeks. And at that time, you let the spears go into a fern, and that fern puts energy back into the root. You're in fern for about 3 or 4 months, and then we all run into a winter month or colder time, and the plants are forced dormant. And then we go through our winter. Next spring, we run that cycle again. Like I said, that's pretty much everywhere in the U.S., so we only get one crop per season off of asparagus here in the States. Many other countries are the same, but there are some countries like Peru and Vietnam, for example, where they farm in a desert. So the way it works there is the spears come up, they harvest for about a month, and then they allow the spears to fern out, and the fern, again, recoups the energy, puts it back down into the crown. So they're in fern for about 4 months, and then at the end of that time, instead of a cold winter hitting, since they don't have that there, they cut back on their irrigation, and they force the plant dormant through that. They'll be dormant for about a month or so, and then whenever they want to start harvesting again, they just turn the water back on. So in Peru, again, using them as an example, they can get 2 crops per year.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense why we often see more Peruvian grown asparagus than U.S. grown for a lot of the year.
Exactly. They can harvest whenever. Luckily, they send most of their product here into the States in our off season, so that helps a little bit. But yeah, it's really a nice situation for them. They can go whenever they want to go.
Now, many of our viewers might be wondering why we're talking about a traditionally field-grown crop on CE Ag Talks. Can you explain how asparagus can fit into CEA?
Sure. We're experimenting with some different methods. We're working with a university in Japan, where they've developed a system that they can grow asparagus inside a greenhouse, and it's basically just like Peru, where you can harvest whenever you want. Again, it's you control your climate in the greenhouse, so it's all triggered. Your dormancy would be triggered by irrigation. So just turn it off when you want to be done here harvesting, and you turn it back on when you want to start harvesting. The other nice thing that we're finding through this trial in Japan is that you have so much less disease pressure there. The asparagus is in the outdoors runs into a lot of fern disease problems. If it's too much rain or too much humidity, you have to ramp up your fungicide sprays. Indoors, you don't have that. Insects are usually less indoors. We're also working with a university in New Zealand. They are harvesting asparagus twice a year indoors. A little different system than Japan is doing, but the this particular grower that's working with the university there, he's timing it so he harvests his indoor asparagus prior to his outdoor. So he'll harvest indoor for a month or so, then he moves outdoors for about 2 months, and then after that, he'll come back into his greenhouse harvest towards the end of the year. So for us, that would be like an October, November harvest. So a lot of advantages. It kind of you can find a little niche here, I think, indoors with the asparagus that we don't see outdoors.
And are these still grown in soil?
Most of them are. There's a researcher in Poland that's playing around with hydroponics, but I haven't heard from him lately. I don't know how he's making out. The grower in New Zealand is actually using large pallet bins, like a watermelon bin, and they fill it with artificial soil, like a ProMix, I guess is what you would say. A lot of different trials being tested right now.
That's exciting. And are these new, is it new asparagus? Is it asparagus that you've used before?
The varieties, I think you're
Varieties,
looking,
yeah.
yeah. It's not new varieties. That's one of the keys. You want to when you move indoors, you want to make sure you have the right variety. That's where we've been really lucky. Our varieties seem to be handling the climate change better than all the other varieties in the world. I mean, it gets hot in the greenhouse and our varieties stand up. They are testing new varieties in these trials. Like I said, it's relatively new. I'd say less than 10 years now that asparagus has been growing indoors. So it's the same old varieties, just different methods, different ways of handling it. You know, I didn't mention outdoors growing. Usually you'll get 10 or 15 years off of a planting. The university in Japan, they're looking at just a 1 year harvest where they plant it, they harvest it to death, and then they pull it out and they start over again. So that's really nice for the organic growers because you really have zero disease pressure at that point.
And I know this is something that you and I have talked about in the past, but there aren't that many asparagus breeders around, right?
No, we're hard to come by. There's here at our farm, my brother and I, we're the only asparagus breeders left in the United States. And I would say we are one of probably less than 10 in the world.
So is there anything else you'd like to share about the future of controlled environment agriculture grown asparagus? Any thoughts there?
Well, I think it's exciting. I think it has a place here, especially in the U.S. We travel all over the world with our asparagus seed sales, and that's one thing we've noticed in other countries, China, Vietnam, Korea. They've been growing asparagus indoors for years. So I do not know of anybody here in the States that's doing indoor production with asparagus. So as I mentioned before, I think it has a niche where you can harvest before outdoor asparagus kicks in. After, we could target Thanksgiving here in the States, possibly Christmas, which we don't usually have that market. So I think there's some, locally grown advantages that growers could run with. Yields are really high indoors if you use the right varieties and the right plant spacings. So I think there's a lot of advantages. It's pretty exciting. It's you don't have to do the 100 acres outside. You can do a 5 acre greenhouse or something like that, and really make some good money.
That is exciting. And where can viewers learn more about the work you're doing with asparagus?
Well, you can always email us. Our webpage is walkerseed.com. We have the social media thing going, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. We try to post once a week to keep growers updated on what we're seeing and what we're doing in the world.
That's great. So Scott, thanks so much for coming on CE Ag Talks and talking asparagus with us today.
Hey, my pleasure, Karen.